I was running on fumes by the time Sunday finally rolled around. There was a limit to what the mind could endure, and I sensed I was quickly approaching my own. Sleep. I'd never had much of a problem with sleeping until recently. It had always been a simple matter of switching off my brain and letting it fire back up when it was ready to. But lately, I was lucky if I even managed a few hours before I sprung awake, gasping for breath. It was easy to pass off my nightmares as nothing more than residual trauma from the accident, and they were mild compared to V's, which were happening regularly enough where she once again dreaded falling asleep. But not knowing whose screams I would wake up to in the darkness was taking a heavy toll on me. Thank fuck I didn't have to go to work today. I was splayed out across the couch enjoying a lazy morning when I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Hey, a gruff voice I didn't recognize replied. This Judy Álvarez? A chill shot up my spine. My thoughts went back to the horror story the doctor had told me at the clinic, the one about the patient who was being tracked by their rapist. But my deck was free of any coding or viruses, so that shouldn't have been possible, right? Who is this? There was a long sigh on the other end. I'm Pedro Cortez, calling you from Garage Nation. You Judy or not? I relaxed and loosened my grip on my hollow. It was about time. Yeah, sorry, that's me. So, what's the deal with my van? Well, I got an estimate for you. Okay, I said nervously. I can straighten out most of the frame and get it drivable, but I'll also need to change out the door, realign the seat, replace the front passenger rim and tire. I could almost feel our account growing lighter as the mechanic rattled off one item after another. By the time he finished, I wanted to crawl into a deep hole and hide. We could afford it, but barely. I considered messaging V to let her know what the damage would be, but decided against it. I didn't want our financial problems to be weighing her down all day, especially if she was working and needed to keep her head in the game. There would be time to tell her later. There was no point in trying to negotiate a lower fee. He knew he had me by the balls as I transferred the down payment and watched our balance shrink. A cursory thanks and a promise to have everything done by the end of the week quickly followed. As soon as I hung up, I tossed my hollow aside and rubbed my temples. I was starting to get a headache, but I refused to look at the cupboard. There was a fresh bottle of vodka stashed inside, compliments of Susie, but I'd barely sipped from it all week. Not that I didn't feel the sporadic urge to pour myself a tall glass every now and then. But as frustrating as my cravings were, I took solace in knowing they were a sign I was going about things the right way. Sighing, I decided to catch up on some sleep and closed my eyes. It was one of those naps where I seemed to drift in and out of consciousness for hours. At some point, I heard something which caused my eyes to pop open. I immediately looked toward the window and felt a wave of relief when I saw the shutters were still shut. Footsteps pattered toward the bedroom. V? I called out in a groggy voice. The footsteps stopped. Hey, I didn't mean to wake you up. It's all right. How was the gig? V stepped around the table and came into view. I perked up as she plopped onto the couch next to me. Even though I hadn't showered or even changed, V somehow looked even worse than I surely did. A long, heavy sigh escaped her lips as she leaned back and closed her eyes. It was all right. Just lots of driving. You look beat, I observed. V groaned in agreement. Goosebumps raised on my skin as I begrudgingly peeled the warm blanket off me and draped it over her. V stirred and moaned as the heavy fabric, still warm with my body heat, pinned her to the couch. No, never gonna get up. I smiled and gave her a peck on the cheek. Good, 'cause you're spending the rest of the day with me. I can't. I got another gig lined up for tonight. I raised a finger to V's lips, silencing her. It broke my heart to see her like this. There were limits to what the body could endure as well. She needed a break, and if she wasn't willing to give herself one, then I would see to it. No more gigs for you today. Jude, no, V. I'm putting my foot down. Don't like seeing you like this. You've done enough and earned yourself a night off. Her lips parted as though she were going to protest, but quickly closed as I set a pillow in my lap and patted it. Her head was drawn toward it like a magnet. "Atta girl," I said soothingly. V let out another long sigh, this one sounding of relief. "Oh, I need this," she finally said. I wanted to run a hand through her hair until she passed into a deep, restful sleep, but I had to tell her the bad news first. "V?" "Yeah, Jude?" Her voice was already turning distant. If I didn't hurry, I'd soon be talking to myself. "I hate to tell you this now, but I don't want to wait till later. I got the estimate back on the van." V stirred but remained quiet. "Fuck, why couldn't I just let her sleep?" "We can cover it, and I took care of things," I continued. "But we're pretty low again." Pretty low was an understatement. We were nearly broke, and the reduced cut Susie was throwing my way meant V would have to keep up with the heavy lifting for the foreseeable future. It was a tremendous burden to place upon her shoulders, and she was already carrying so much. The effects of withdrawal, being terrified of falling asleep, the taxing demands of her job. There were limits. I needed her to be rested before I sent her back out there, and I felt awful for thinking of her in those terms. Before I sent her back out there, as if she were some kind of joy toy and I was her pimp. Her eyes parted and I felt her muscles tensing as she started to sit up. "I should go back out there." "No, V." I pushed her back down. I know what you want, Jude." She shifted so she could look up at me. Those beautiful blue eyes of hers were filled with concern as she reached up and grazed the back of her hand along my cheek. "I know you don't want me out there, but I also know this shit's taking a real toll on you. I can see it in your eyes. V." My voice trailed off. "Please don't give up on me, Jude." My eyes widened, shocked at the suggestion. "What are you talking about? I'll never give up on you." I tried to sound as reassuring as I could, but was seeming to have mixed results. She relaxed, but there was still concern in her eyes. Something was wrong. "What is it, V? What's the matter?" She was chewing nervously on her lip, and anytime she did that, I knew she was about to spill whatever was nagging at her. Only, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what she was about to say. Did she know? "Jude, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I'm a little worried about you. I know you're trying to help me. In fact, fuck that. You are helping me so much, but you haven't been eating much, and lately you've been sleeping even worse than I am." Food and sleep. Two simple things that continued to elude me. She raised a good point about the need for self-care, and I could certainly force myself to eat a little more, which might also help me sleep better. But what worried me was that V had actually noticed something was wrong. That wasn't like her. V was probably one of the least observant people I'd ever met, and I didn't mean that in a derogatory way. It was charming. One of the many things I loved about her. I thought I'd been doing a good job at masking things while chipping away at progress, but clearly I hadn't if she was sensing something was off. "It's just been a stressful time. These certainly aren't our best days, are they?" V nodded. I gave in and ran a hand through her hair. "But we're gonna see our way through 'em. You watch." "Jude, I'm not saying this to try to rope you into being an addict like me or anything, but..." Where was she going with this? But what? "But..." V took a deep breath. "Beauties are medical grade sleeping aids. Please understand, I'm not trying to enable you or anything, but maybe..." Again, her voice trailed off. Why couldn't she just say it? Hell, as soon as she'd mentioned the word beauties, I realized what she was getting at, and honestly, she wasn't the only one who'd been thinking about it. I'd developed a much better appreciation for the terror V experienced when she snapped out of a nightmare, not knowing who she was or if she was safe. So far, I'd been able to snap myself out of it pretty quickly and keep V from becoming overly concerned about me, but their faces lingered in my mind long after. Their laughter. Get it off my face. What had happened to her? A litany of troubling questions suddenly popped up in my head. Were we both keeping horrible secrets from one another? Was V trying to protect me just as much as I was trying to protect her? Why hadn't I asked her yet about them? This wasn't the right time to ask. She was worried about me, and I wanted to put her mind at ease so she could rest. I know you're not trying to get me hooked, V. Besides, we're so broke we'd have to cut the pills in half. Not sure how that would work. That earned me a small laugh. Now there's a thought. Are we going to be scratching and clawing at one another over who gets to have a decent night's sleep? I shouldn't have laughed at such a morbid thought, but I couldn't help myself. Hey, considering you got a head start on me, those last slivers are all mine. We burst out into laughter, probably because of the healthy release of stress that had been building up inside of us. I pulled the blanket further up until it rested just underneath her chin. You look like a tortilla. I'm feeling like one too. I leaned forward, ignoring the stab of pain in my neck that accompanied the movement, and planted a kiss on her forehead. Her eyes were turning glassy once more. You go to sleep now. V closed her eyes. You gonna be here when I wake up? Yeah, V. I got you. No bad dreams either. I'll stay awake and keep an eye on you. My chin trembled as her face relaxed. It didn't take long for her to fall asleep, and although the cushion dug uncomfortably into my back, I didn't move a muscle. But after a few hours had passed, I was desperate to get off the couch. My thighs shook as I clenched them together like a vice to keep from pissing myself. V was about to become the unwitting recipient of a golden shower if she didn't get up now. V? She stirred and her eyes parted open. I gave her a not-so-gentle nudge before she could close them again. You gotta get up. It's getting late and I gotta go to the bathroom. A low grumble croaked from her throat as she forced herself into a sitting position. I jumped off the couch as quickly as I could and rushed to the bathroom, heaving an unbridled sigh of relief as I sat on the toilet and emptied my bladder. Hopefully, she would appreciate what I'd done for her. Judging from the pins and needles stabbing my feet, she must have been out for a few hours, though I had also managed to catnap. I felt lighter when I finally emerged. V quickly shuffled past me. It was growing dark outside, and a quick check of my holo confirmed that it was past 6. I was hungry and didn't know what V wanted for dinner, and I wasn't about to knock on the door and ask. Seeing as how I'd been the good output all afternoon, I decided to reward myself by calling in an order for a pizza from Buck-a-Slice. The quality of their food was terrible. Soggy crust, synthetic ingredients, cheese that slid off the slice as soon as you lifted it, but it was greasy, tasted delicious, and most importantly, it was cheap. Unfortunately, it wasn't timely. The sky was pitch black by the time the pizza arrived. We were sitting next to each other at the counter, gorging ourselves. V had put on some music, and while I didn't care much for most of her playlists, some of the oldies she was browsing through caught my ear. Slow down, will ya? I'm just trying to find something preem to listen to. I rolled my eyes. If they're not preem, then why do you have them saved on a playlist? I don't know. Maybe in case I'm ever in the mood to listen to one. And clearly that's not now, I observed. Can you pick something out, please? You're killing the vibe. V pursed her lips and continued swiping from one song to the next. I grit my teeth. There was something indescribably annoying about hearing the first chord or two of a good song only for it to be cut off by a different one. Suddenly, her fingers came to a halt and her eyes widened. I listened intently as a low electronic drum beat started playing. Yes, now this is good. I gave her the benefit of the doubt and took another bite of my slice, grateful to finally be listening to something I could wrap my head around. The song she had chosen was strange, a little dark even, but it had a peculiar, almost fairy tale-like quality that I liked. Perhaps V had actually stumbled across something good for a change. I tapped my foot to the beat while V bopped her head back and forth, lost in some imaginary concert experience. Oh, this part coming up is Nova. Come on, Jude. She looked like a complete gonk in every sense. I tried to hold back the smile tugging at my lips, but it was hopeless. Here it comes. Her face twisted in exaggerated rage as the music swelled, lip singing to the lyrics blaring from her speaker. Okay, I had to admit, whatever this song was, it was a banger. V had an enormous grin on her face as we bounced our heads to the rhythm. It was only when she lifted her slice of pizza and all the cheese slid off, landing on the counter with a wet plop, that she stopped. Fuck! Don't let that go to waste, I chided her. That's the best part. I felt ridiculous reminding V of that common fact. What kind of tormented soul would let the cheese go to waste? As V peeled the greasy goodness off the counter and dropped it into her mouth, I turned my attention back to the song. It was an odd era of music, one which had been forgotten by the radio stations that chose to blare the latest pop shit, which was devoid of any talent. But I had developed a particular appreciation for many of the classics I'd stumbled across over the years. Fleetwood Mac, Radiohead, Diamond Brigade. Those were real artists who poured their hearts and souls into their music. They had managed to create something that endured, even if time was slowly erasing it. How presumptuous was it of me to call myself an artist? The song was nearly over. V grabbed a pair of Nicolas out of the fridge. Where'd you come across that one? I asked. It's pretty good. V looked at me as though I'd suddenly had my eyes swapped out with chrome. Are you serious? You've never heard of the Lost Boys? I shook my head. These were the kind of moments I relished. After years of being cramped up together, it often seemed like there was little left to learn about one another. But every so often, one of us would hit the other with a stunner, just as V was doing to me now. Her eyes sparkled, and a devious grin spread across her face. Oh shit. How have you never heard of it? It's a classic. V, I spend most of my time editing porn, not watching old movies. Still, how is that possible? V didn't wait for my reply. Instead, she handed me my beverage and draped a loving arm over my shoulder, pulling me close. Here's what we're gonna do. We are gonna heat up some popcorn, stretch out on the couch, dim the lights, and then you and I are gonna watch The Lost Boys. I didn't see any way out of it, and honestly, it sounded like a great way to end the day, and it wasn't a Bushido film, thank fuck. That last one had been a dumpster fire, and I wasn't in the mood to continue binging the series. Alright. V erupted in glee and raced toward the cupboard. I hissed under my breath when she opened it, revealing the bottle of vodka inside. Shit, I had not been prepared for that. Fortunately, it only took her a moment to dig out the box of popcorn we kept back there. She was really getting into the swing of things, even pampering me by offering her lap as a pillow, which was a welcome change. Once we were comfortable, we started the film. Sure enough, the same song began to play as the opening credits rolled. What's this about anyway? I asked. I'm not spoiling it. Sit and watch. I sighed and tossed a piece of popcorn over my shoulder. V snorted and sent another kernel bouncing off the back of my head. Fine, if that's how she wanted to play things. Rather than getting into a protracted food fight I'd probably have to clean in the morning, I slid the bowl out of V's reach and adjusted so I was resting the full weight of my head on her lap. I expected her to protest, but instead, I moaned in appreciation as I felt her fingers run through my hair. The movie was okay as far as vampire flicks went, though it was incredibly predictable and dated. A lot of the humor went over my head, though that didn't stop V from bursting out into laughter at odd times. We were around the middle when my eyes grew heavy. I scraped around the bowl and tossed the last few bits of popcorn into my mouth.
What's happening, Mister? Michael, I can't tell you. I don't want to help you. What's happening?
The familiar music played once more as the two characters in the scene engaged in an overly dramatic love scene. V shifted underneath me. A few moments passed before I heard her release a long sigh and she adjusted once again. She rested a hand on my shoulder and began kneading the muscles leading toward my neck, causing me to hiss in pain and flinch away. Sorry, it's okay, I reassured her. Just be gentle. Her hand went back to my shoulder. She was careful not to hurt me again, but her movements were becoming more urgent as the scene came to an end. I closed my eyes, feeling tired and mildly annoyed. V had gotten a chance to rest earlier while I sat patiently with a full bladder, begging me for relief. Now that it was my turn, I was watching what she wanted to watch and had apparently decided that now was the right time to get laid. Telling her to stop wouldn't end well. She would understand, of course, and settle in to watch the rest of the movie. But my rejection of her would stew in the back of both of our minds. I knew that feeling well. That pent-up frustration without an outlet. I'd grown accustomed to it at Lizzie's. Perhaps she might try to relieve herself in the middle of the night, but I knew her well enough to suspect she'd roll away from me instead, communicating her dissatisfaction through heavy sighs and angry tugs of the blanket. Her hand journeyed lower. I was growing increasingly uncomfortable as her fingers traced the outline of my breast before delicately toying with my nipple. It felt good, but I was so tired. I was lucky V couldn't see the way I rolled my eyes when I pushed myself up and rolled over to face her. As expected, her pupils were blown out and her lips were parted open as she breathed heavy with desire. I leaned in and pressed my lips to hers, hoping I could take my mind off of the persistent aching in my neck. This wasn't a good angle for me. She still tasted like buttered popcorn. When her tongue swirled and flicked around my own, all I could focus on was a kernel that had gotten wedged between her front teeth. Why couldn't I get into this? My ribs throbbed from pressing up against V, and she'd already forgotten about my neck as her hands moved roughly across my back, trying to pull my shirt up. A particularly nasty jolt made me tense. This wasn't sustainable. It hurt too much, yet V would be angry if I backed out now. I pulled away and forced myself to slide further down the couch so I could settle between her legs. At least this way I wasn't having to crane my neck. Judy. There was little effort behind the way she feebly tugged on my arms, pretending she didn't want this. Fortunately, she had changed into a pair of loose-fitting shorts beforehand, which made things easy for me. All I had to do was part the fabric aside, and, of course, she hadn't bothered to wear any underwear. She'd known damn well what she was planning. Judy, wait, just relax. I'm gonna take care of you. Wait, did she seriously just look disappointed at me? It hadn't exactly been a full rolling of the eyes moment that would have ground things to a halt. Rather, it had been the way her eyes wandered, almost as if she were searching for something. Do you want to do this? No, V, I don't. But I pushed forward and answered her with my mouth, slowly dragging my tongue along the outside of her folds. She wasn't completely drenched yet, but she was slick enough that her taste easily mixed with the residual flavor of popcorn still in my mouth. Judy. I kept at it, teasing her with my tongue, stopping just short of her clit. It didn't take long before her hips were lifting off the couch to meet my movements. I pulled away each time, keeping her from earning the release she sought, knowing it would hasten that very release. The occasional moans escaping her lips were verging on whimpers as she began breathing in ragged gasps. I only hoped when she came, V wouldn't forget about my neck and try grabbing my hair. When her pussy glistened with my saliva and her own juices, I finally gave her what she craved. I lashed at her clit and reached under her shirt so I could tweak her sensitive nipple. The moan that escaped her echoed off of the walls. For some reason, my attention was drawn back to the movie, which was still playing in the background. I didn't know what was happening, and V clearly wasn't about to explain it to me. But I tried to listen in on the dialogue, even as I kept eating her out. Judy, wait. I gave her nipple a gentle pinch, turning whatever V had been trying to say into a mule and causing her to writhe in pleasure. With my free hand, I pressed a pair of fingers against her entrance and slowly worked them inside, meeting little resistance as I opened her up. More bizarre sounds came from her mouth. I want... She couldn't get it out. I studied her face, timing each flick of my tongue with when she opened her mouth to speak. Her head was thrown back in a glorious display of ecstasy as I fucked her at an increasingly vigorous pace. Stop. Oh, for fuck's sake, enough. I pulled my hand away from her breast and one rough motion pressed my palm over her mouth, silencing her. Her eyes snapped open as my tongue and fingers began moving faster. There was a wild mix of... That was strange. Bewilderment, ecstasy, even a hint of fear upon her face. Her walls quickly clenched around my digits. Come for me, I breathed as her muscles trembled. Just as I'd feared, V gripped a fistful of my hair, sending an uncomfortable jolt of pain shooting along my neck. She tensed, back arching, and held me in place as her body shuddered, moan after moan escaping into my palm until she finally went limp. After stealing a final glance at her swollen labia, I scooched up and rested my head on her still heaving chest. I was about to wipe my mouth off when I froze. It suddenly dawned on me what I had just done, what I had stopped V from saying. Stop. And I hadn't. In fact, I'd done far worse. I had silenced her. I felt like vomiting. Jesus, I was no different from those monsters who'd had their way with me. Why? Why did you do that? I couldn't bring myself to answer her. She had said stop, and I hadn't. I was a monster. Do what? My voice had squeaked from my throat as I braced myself for the worst, certain our relationship was about to fall apart. You won't let me touch you, she said finally. You won't let me fuck you. It's been a week. My eyelashes grazed against her shirt as I blinked, confused. She hadn't noticed that I'd just practically raped her? How was that possible? Why did I feel relieved? And had it really been a week? I quickly tried to piece together an explanation. It's not because you lack talent with that incredible tongue of yours, I said seductively, refusing to meet her gaze. Which you're not letting me use, V retorted. It's just been a bad week. I'm still a little sore from the accident, and you know I was sick earlier in the week. V rested a shaky hand on my shoulder. Well, I didn't get whatever bug you had, and you better tell your body to heal up fast. You can only string a girl along with that sexy ass of yours for so long before she breaks. But seriously, I like making you feel good, and I miss that. I silently sighed in my head as I realized another milestone lay ahead of me. Intimacy with V had never been a challenge. Anything but, in fact. But I would need to spread my legs for her, and soon, to keep her concerns at bay. And now that I couldn't trust myself, Christ, I hadn't stopped. Soon, V, you'll have your chance to make it up to me. I better. I followed her gaze back to the movie, but had trouble focusing on it. Why did everything have to be so hard? Every time I buried one demon, another threatened to pull me under. Just like V had said, I could only be strung along for so long before I snapped. You want to watch the rest of the movie? I asked. Yeah, I'm not ready to go to sleep yet. I finally built up the courage to look at her. You're scared? V nodded, not taking her eyes off the movie. There was a lot more going on behind her eyes that she didn't want to voice, and that was fair. Sometimes, silence spoke louder than words. I turned my attention back to the movie and adjusted so I was more comfortable. Here, V. I got you. But I quickly felt my eyelids growing heavy. I fought against it for as long as I could, telling myself I was staying awake for V, and not because I was terrified of not knowing whose screams I would wake up to. But I finally lost the battle and drifted off to sleep. V was right to be afraid.